Hi, welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and I would like to teach you how to play the 1 to 4 player game by Tasty Minstrel Games, Dungeon Roll. Here, you'll be taking on the role of an adventurer going deeper and deeper into a dungeon, fighting monsters, collecting treasures, and the experience points required to win. So, do you keep going deeper to get more points, or do you get out early with the points you have and your head still intact? Everything you need is located in this box, so join me at the table and I'll show you how to play. The game comes with 8 heroes, and players can either pick one of their choice or distribute one to each player randomly. Each card is double-sided, but should start on the side face up that has the wooden backing behind the card text. This is the novice side. The other side is known as the master side. The different heroes have unique special abilities written on them, and we'll discuss those later, but the game has this book of heroes to provide you with additional information on how these effects work, so you can keep that near the play area as well. These are experience tokens, and they're double-sided to allow you to pick from a variety of denominations as needed during the game. These are the treasure tokens. You can easily identify them because they all have a gold dragon on the back side, and these need to be drawn randomly during the game. So you can either place them back into the game box to draw from, or just ensure they're all placed face down on the table. There are 2 kinds of 6-sided dice included with the game: the black dungeon dice and the white party dice. The player who is most recently underground becomes the first adventurer and collects the white party dice. The player to their left becomes the first dungeon lord, collecting the dungeon dice. This red swatch doesn't come with the game, but I've discovered that black dice on a black tablecloth inherit the powers of invisibility. So I'm going to use this so you can see what's actually going on. The dungeon lord also collects the 10-sided level die, and now each player can take a player aid card. One side explains all of the different treasure tokens, and on the other are some general gameplay rules for easy reference. And now the players are ready to begin. The game takes place over 3 rounds, and in each round, each player will be able to form a party of companions, head into the dungeon, fight monsters, collect treasures, and the farther they go into that dungeon, the more experience points they'll be able to collect if they leave triumphantly. If they're forced to flee the dungeon, they may not collect any experience points at all. After each player has completed 3 dungeon delves, they'll add up the experience points they collected, and the player with the most experience points is the winner. So to start the game, the first adventurer is going to collect the 7 party dice and roll them to form a party of companions. You may roll fighters, clerics, mages, thieves, champions, or scrolls. Although this won't be true at the beginning of the game, it's possible in later rounds that your hero will have become exhausted during a previous round, and this is shown by the hero being placed sideways. So now, at the beginning of a new round, you are allowed to refresh your hero by placing it upright. Next, the current dungeon lord sets the dungeon level die to 1. The number on the die also tells the dungeon lord how many dungeon dice to roll for this level. So this means every delve will start with the dungeon lord rolling a single die. Any dragons rolled are immediately removed from the current level and then placed in a designated area known as the dragon's lair. Now, this can be anywhere on the table, but I like to place these directly on top of the adventuring hero's card as a friendly reminder that danger is lurking close by. We'll worry about dragons a little bit later. For now, we go back to the dungeon, and it's empty. There's no dungeon dice here. This was easy. The level is cleared, and now the hero moves directly to the regroup phase. Here, they will pick one of 3 available options. The first, they can retire to the tavern. The adventurer collects a number of experience points equal to the current dungeon level die. That would be 1 experience point in this case, and that ends their delve. Now all of the party dice would be passed to the left, and that player would become the new adventurer. That player would pass all the dungeon dice to their left. That new player would become the dungeon lord. The dungeons reset with a level die at 1 and the new dungeon lord rolling that single dungeon die. But we're not leaving the dungeon yet. We only did 1 level and it was super easy. So what other choices do we have? Well, if we did very well and the level die was currently at 10, the player is said to be the stuff of legend and collects 10 experience points and must leave the dungeon. Basically, you've emptied out the dungeon. There's nothing left to fight. Besides, nobody likes to show off. Take your 10 points and let someone else have a turn. Obviously, though, we were still at level 1, so we're not the stuff of legend just yet. But we can get there by choosing the third and final option, Seek Glory. This means the player plans to delve deeper into the dungeon and face more challenges. So the Dungeon Lord increases the level die by 1. Now the Dungeon Lord takes a number of dungeon dice equal to the value found on the level die, which currently is 2. These dice will be rolled to populate this level of the dungeon. And don't forget, until an adventurer leaves the dungeon, any dragons previously rolled will stay in the dragon's lair. But now, let's see what we get. The most common result on a dungeon die is a monster. There are skeletons, oozes, and goblins. Let's say the Dungeon Lord rolled a skeleton and an ooze. Anytime monsters are rolled, the adventurer enters the monster phase and must defeat them or be forced to flee the dungeon and not collect any experience points. And you need experience points to win, so let's see what we can do during the monster phase. One option we have is to use a scroll from our party dice. Anytime you want to use any of your dice, you must first discard it to an area you designate as your graveyard. We'll just say over here is our graveyard. Then you resolve the die's ability. A scroll allows you to re-roll any number of dungeon and party dice, but not dragons. Remember, dragons are never re-rolled. So for example, I may choose to re-roll the ooze dungeon die and this mage and thief die, hoping perhaps to get something more favorable. Oh well, it's another monster, a goblin this time, but I did manage to roll my thief into a champion and my mage into another mage. I can also use one of my companions to defeat a monster. Any single companion can defeat any single monster. So again, I first choose the party die I wish to use, discard it, and then activate its power. In this case, the power to defeat monsters. So I will use the cleric to defeat the goblin and the mage to defeat the skeleton. Now I know what you're thinking. Rodney, if each of these companions can defeat a single monster, why do we have all these different looking companions? They all do the same thing. Excellent question. I need to explain this a little further. So let's go back a step and pretend we hadn't used the cleric and the mage to defeat the monsters, and let's pretend the two monsters had been two skeletons instead. Now, just like before, I could use the cleric and the mage to defeat these two skeletons, or a fighter and a champion, or a thief and a champion, but there's a better way to do this. Most companions have a certain kind of monster they're especially good at defeating. For example, when you use the cleric to fight monsters, it will defeat all skeletons currently in the dungeon. So now both monsters have been removed, but we only had to use one of our party dice. And it's very easy to keep track of which monsters each companion can defeat more easily. The purple mage defeats all purple oozes. The green fighter defeats all green goblins, and the gray cleric defeats all gray skeletons. And the champions are really as good as they sound. Any one champion can be used to defeat all monsters of any one of the different types. So for example, if you were on level 6 of the dungeon, facing 4 goblins and 2 oozes, you could use one fighter to get rid of all the goblins, and one mage to get rid of all the oozes. Or you could have used one champion to get rid of all the goblins, and the other champion to get rid of all the oozes. Either way, it's a lot better than spending 6 different dice to defeat 6 monsters. Now all that said, the thief can only ever defeat one monster at a time. Aside from monsters and dragons, the dungeon dice also have sides which show loot, coming in the form of chests and potions. So let's take this example. We have an adventurer at level 6, and these are the 6 dungeon dice that were rolled. We know that all dragons are immediately removed and placed into the dragon's lair. And although there is a mix of monsters and loot, the adventurer must always defeat all monsters before claiming any of the loot. Because looting happens separately in the loot phase, which occurs after the monster phase. So a cleric will be used to remove this ooze. Any one companion may be used to open a chest. So let's use this fighter here to claim this chest, and that will allow us to randomly draw one of the treasure tokens and reveal it, adding it to our collection. But a better way to do this would have been to use a thief, because when you use a thief, it will open all of the chests currently in the dungeon. So this would allow us to remove both of these dice and claim a second treasure token. A single champion can also be used to open all of the chests in a level. Any party die can be used to drink all of the potions currently in the dungeon. You can even have the scroll drink the potion. So once you remove the potion die, you may now go into your graveyard, collect any one die that you want, and bring it back into your party with any face that you want. Maybe I'll collect a champion. You never have to open chests or drink potions. You can ignore those dice and still go on to the next level of the dungeon. So rolling them is always good because, at the very least, it's less monsters you have to fight. Okay, let's go over this very quickly. In the monster phase, you can use any number of scrolls to roll any number of dungeon and party dice. You can also use your companions to fight monsters and collect treasures and drink potions. The other thing you can do is you can use the abilities of your hero. Heroes have both a specialty and a unique ability. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. The specialty, which is shown here, can be used over and over again, but the unique ability here can only be used once per dungeon delve. Let's pretend I have 2 goblins in the dungeon. Now, I could use one cleric to defeat one of them, and the thief to defeat the other. But I could also use the spell sword's unique ability, Arcane Blade. This lets my hero act as if it was a fighter or mage die. The symbol here reminds me that I must exhaust this card to activate the effect by turning it on its side. This reminds me that for the rest of this dungeon delve, I'll no longer be able to use the unique ability, but I'll still be able to use my specialty. I'm going to pretend that my spell sword is now a fighter and remove both of these goblins. And let's look at that specialty as an example. The spell sword is able to use fighters as mages and mages as fighters. So once again, if I was facing these 2 goblins and only had a single mage, I could use the specialty to have the mage act as a fighter, discarding it to the graveyard and removing both of the goblins. And remember, your hero will refresh at the start of your next dungeon delve. Now normally, after defeating all of the monsters in the dungeon and claiming any loot you want to take, you'd be able to move on to the regroup phase, unless there are 3 or more dragons in the dragon's lair. The dragon has now awoken and you must defeat it. And this can only be done by using 3 different companions. So as good as champions are, a mage and 2 champions will not defeat this dragon, but a mage, champion, and fighter would. 3 different companions. As you'll find out later, some treasure tokens can be used in place of companions. So in this case, we could use a mage and a champion, as well as this Vorpal sword, which acts as a fighter in order to defeat the dragon. The dragon would be removed, and we would return this treasure back to the box. If you can't defeat the dragon, you must flee the dungeon, collecting no experience. But if you do defeat the dragon, collect another treasure token and give yourself a single experience point. Then, it's on to the regroup phase as normal. Now, one thing to keep in mind, when you're in that regroup phase and you're asking yourself, should I retire to the tavern? Maybe seek more glory, go for some more experience points. You're only going to be taking party dice that you haven't used yet with you onto the next level. Those other dice that you used to drink all those potions and open chests and fight monsters and dragons, they're in the graveyard. They're dead or sick and tired of fighting for you, so you're not going to be able to get any more use out of them, unless you got really lucky and rolled a potion and was able to revive a few of them. So I'm sitting here at level 6, thinking about going on to level 7, and all I have is 1 champion. This might be a good time to cut my losses, go get a drink at the tavern, and collect my 6 experience points and let the next player get on with their adventure. So it's certainly a part of the game, trying to figure out when do you push your luck and go farther, and when do you stop. The other thing experience points can be used for, besides winning the game, is leveling up your hero. On your card, you will find the experience points required to level up your hero. For example, as soon as this player has collected 5 experience points, the spell sword can be flipped over. Now notice I said as soon as those points are collected. You don't have to spend them, you just have to have them. Now, the spell sword has been converted to a battle mage, the master version of this hero. On this side of the card, you will find better abilities that may help you go farther on future dungeon delves. Now here's a situation you might encounter as the Dungeon Lord. The hero is on level 6, so you go to roll 6 dice, and you only have 5 because 2 of them are dragons in the dragon's lair, and you never collect and re-roll these. So just roll the dice you have. Odds are good you're going to roll a dragon anyway and unleash those dice onto the poor hero and you'll get them back for the next dungeon roll. Well, play will continue, going around the table, each player becoming an adventurer, and you will do this until each player has done 3 dungeon delves. Then all players will total their own experience points, adding an additional experience point for each treasure they collected but didn't use. Whichever player has the most experience points is the winner. If there's a tie, whichever of the tied players has fewer treasure tokens is the winner. If there's still a tie, they can rejoice in a shared victory. You can also play this game solo. You'll need to roll the dungeon dice for yourself, but do 3 delves and get the best score that you can. As you can see here, the game comes with ways to rank your efforts and achievements that you can try for. The last thing to explain are the treasure tokens. On your turn, you may use as many of the treasures that you collected anytime you want for their one-time effect. So this means after using them, return them and mix them in with the rest of the uncollected treasures. Let's take a moment right now and quickly go over each of the treasures and see how they work. This is a Vorpal sword and can be used as if it were a fighter dice. And it's green to help you remember that. This talisman is gray like a cleric to remind you that it can be discarded to be used as a cleric. Likewise, the Scepter of Power may be used as if it were a mage, and the Thieves' Tools act as a thief die would. The Ring of Invisibility is a great way of skating past an angry dragon. When used, all dragon dice in the dragon's lair are returned to the dungeon dice pool. This does not count as defeating the dragon, so you don't get a treasure or an experience point, but this might let you survive the dungeon level or even give you the courage to press on to the next one. Dragon scales don't have a special power, but like any unused treasure, provide you with 1 experience point at the end of the game. Each pair, however, provide an additional 2 experience points. So these 2 scales would give you a total of 4 experience points. Unlike a regular potion on a die, doesn't require you to spend a die to drink it. Instead, just discard this token and then reclaim one of your companions from the graveyard and set its face to any side. Dragon Bait can be used to turn all monsters currently rolled in the dungeon into dragon dice. These are then immediately moved to the dragon's lair. So it's a great quick way to clear out the dungeon, but you may have a dragon to face now. Finally, the town portal can be used at any point during your dungeon delve to immediately retire safely from the dragon, collecting the experience points listed on the level die at that moment. However, if you do not use the town portal, it will be worth 2 experience points at the end of the game instead of the usual 1 experience point. And there you have it. That's everything you need to know to play Dungeon Roll. We're also going to be releasing a video where we go over the different heroes and their abilities, as well as a gameplay video so you can follow along with us and really see how the game works. If you have any questions at all, though, please don't hesitate to ask them in the comments below. I'll answer them as soon as I get a chance, or you can forward your questions on to Tasty Minstrel Games, the publisher of Dungeon Roll. But until the next episode, good luck in those dungeons, and thanks for watching.